Hey, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to DTNsights. I'm Greg Montgomery, General Manager of Agriculture at DTN. Today, we're exploring a part of agriculture that's growing in importance, but does not always get the attention it deserves, specialty identity preserved crops. Consumers are asking more questions about where their food comes from. Food manufacturers want greater consistency, traceability, and sustainability. At the same time, growers are looking for opportunities to capture more value for every acre. Joining me is Sandy Hart, General Manager at Sevita, one of North America's leading suppliers of food grade soybeans. Sevita has been working with DTN Grain Discovery, and Sandy's experience with that platform is the big part of why I wanted to have him join this conversation. So, Sandy, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Greg. Excited to chat.
All right, let's jump right in. So, tell me about Sevita. What it does, its role in the grain supply chain, and how it creates value to farmers and to downstream buyers.
Sure. So Sevita International is a vertically integrated Canadian soybean company. We have business operations at every critical juncture in the soy value chain. So we develop our own varieties through a breeding program, Sevita Genetics. We sell and contract those with farmers across North America. We buy back that production and we export it to food manufacturers and trading houses, primarily in Asia, but elsewhere around the world as well. And our products get used in the manufacturing of soy food. So tofu, soy milk, miso, and other plant-based products.
So do you source only food grade soybeans, or do you have other lines of business?
So we do have a full spectrum soybean seed lineup. So we sell all of the major traits in soybean seed as well. The primary business driver for Sevita is the closed loop food grade soybeans. So developed by us, sold by us to the growers as seed, and then marketed overseas.
And then your kind of grower footprint, where is it primarily?
So we're primarily in Canada. Ontario and Quebec is where Sevita's market share is strongest from a procurement perspective. We're also active in Atlantic Canada, Manitoba, and a little bit in the Midwestern US.
Okay. Have you always been in the food grade soybean space?
Yeah, since the beginning. We were